The sun set low in the Arizona desert, casting a fiery glow across the endless stretches of dry land. A figure stood tall in the horizon, the wind gently pushing back long black hair, a profile so striking that it almost seemed to belong to a myth. She was a woman of extraordinary height, 7 feet tall, with muscles honed by years of living under the harshest conditions. Her name was Aiyana, and she was known throughout the land, not just for her unmatched strength but for her unshakable resolve. Aiyana had grown up on the rugged lands of her Apache ancestors, raised by her father, a fierce warrior, who instilled in her a sense of duty, pride, and power. From the moment she could walk, she was trained to fight, hunt, and survive the desert's unforgiving environment. Her mother had passed when Aiyana was young, leaving her father to guide her through the ways of their people. He told her that no man could ever handle her, not because of her strength, but because of the fierce spirit that burned within her. "You are a woman meant to lead," her father would often say, "and no man, no matter how strong, will ever be able to tame your fire." As Aiyana grew, the words of her father rang true. Men from all corners of the Wild West tried to court her, to prove their strength, to show that they could win her heart, but she turned them all away. Her pride, the power she carried in every step, intimidated them. They could not match her strength. They could not match her resolve. By the time she reached adulthood, Aiyana had become a living legend. Stories about her traveled across the country. They spoke of the Apache warrior who could outfight, outlast, and outthink any man who crossed her path. There were whispers in saloons, around campfires, and in the dusty towns of the West, "No man can handle her." It was a belief that Aiyana held herself. Men tried to prove otherwise, but she never allowed them the chance. She had seen the prideful nature of men, and how fragile it could be when they were faced with a woman who was their equal, or in her case, their superior. And so she kept them at arm's length. There was no room in her life for weakness, for submission, for anything other than her own purpose. But fate had other plans. It was on a rare occasion, as Aiyana traveled eastward across the plains, that she came across a cowboy. He was unlike any man she had ever encountered. His name was Jack. He was tall, rugged, with kind eyes that seemed to carry a quiet confidence rather than arrogance. Jack had heard of Aiyana's reputation, but unlike many others, he did not approach her with pride or boastfulness. He did not seek to challenge her. Instead, he simply offered a smile, a gesture of kindness amidst the harsh world they both inhabited. "You're far from home, ma'am," Jack had said when they crossed paths near a watering hole. His voice was calm, steady, as though he had nothing to prove, nothing to fight for except peace in the moment. Aiyana had sized him up in an instant. His clothes were plain, his demeanor unassuming. She could tell he wasn't wealthy, nor was he overly concerned with his appearance. His face was weathered from the sun, his hands rough from years of hard labor. Yet there was something about him that intrigued her, something that made her pause. For once, Aiyana did not immediately dismiss him as so many others. She eyed him warily, unsure of what to make of him. "What do you want, cowboy?" she asked, her voice as sharp as the wind. Jack only smiled again. "I don't want anything, ma'am," he replied, "just offering a bit of company on a lonely road. I reckon the journey's a lot easier with someone to share it with." Even for a moment, Aiyana felt a pang in her chest, though she could not place the emotion. She had lived her life alone. Why did the presence of this stranger suddenly stir something inside her? For days they traveled the same path. Jack would appear every morning at the crack of dawn, with his quiet smile and gentle demeanor. Sometimes he would help her with a task, sometimes he would offer a story about his travels, and sometimes they would simply walk together in silence. The oddest thing was that Aiyana didn't mind his company. She didn't feel threatened or irritated by him. She felt calm. He never tried to prove his strength to her or make her feel lesser. In fact, he never commented on her height, her strength, or her reputation. He simply treated her as a fellow human being, as if she were no different from anyone else. As they journeyed further, the desert began to feel less lonely. Aiyana's heart, once closed off, slowly began to open. She found herself looking forward to Jack's presence, though she would never admit it. The walls she had built around herself, the walls that had kept men at a distance for years, began to crack. It was a quiet transformation, one that came not from force or confrontation, but from understanding, from a connection that neither of them had expected. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery orange glow across the sky, Aiyana and Jack sat by a campfire. The air was cool, and the sound of the crackling fire filled the silence between them. "You're different from the others," Aiyana said, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. "Why?" Jack looked at her, his expression gentle. I reckon it's because I'm not here to prove anything to you, he said. I'm just here to be with you. If that's not enough, then I'll move on. But I'd rather stay if you'll let me. Aiyana felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. No man had ever spoken to her like that before. She had always been the one to keep control, to dictate the terms of every interaction. But now she wasn't so sure. For the first time, she questioned the walls she had so carefully built around her heart. Little did she know, the quiet cowboy who had crossed her path would soon become the only man who could truly understand her, and perhaps in the end, the only one who could handle her. The desert was quieter now, a stillness that settled into Aiyana's bones. The crackling fire was the only sound between them, the warmth of the flames contrasting with the chill of the night air. She couldn't understand why she felt so conflicted, so uncertain. Jack's calm presence was unsettling, not because it was uncomfortable, but because it was so different from anything she had ever known. He wasn't trying to impress her, prove his strength, or make her need him in any way. He was simply there. Aiyana stared into the fire, the flames casting fleeting shadows across her face. She didn't want to acknowledge it, but there was something about Jack that stirred something deep inside her, something she had long buried. She had always prided herself on being a woman who needed no one. Strong, independent, unshakable. But now, with Jack sitting beside her, she found herself wondering if she had been wrong all along. You don't talk much about yourself, Jack said, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, not probing but inviting. What's it like being you? A woman so strong, so fierce. Is it lonely? The question caught her off guard. She was not used to being asked such things. People didn't ask about her, not really. They feared her. But Jack wasn't afraid. His eyes, steady and kind, held hers, waiting for an answer. Aiyana took a deep breath, her usual deflection not coming as easily. For a long moment she said nothing. The wind blew, carrying the scent of the desert and a sense of something that felt new, a vulnerability she hadn't known she could have. Lonely? She finally repeated. Maybe, but it's not about being lonely. It's about surviving. Every day out here in this world you fight to survive. You fight to keep what's yours, your pride, your land, your people. I've had to be strong, Jack. I've had to prove myself time and time again, because the world won't let you forget that you're a woman who doesn't need anyone, a woman who is too much for anyone. There was a tinge of bitterness in her voice that she hadn't expected. She hadn't realized how much the weight of being too strong, too independent had hurt her over the years. The isolation, the rejection, the assumption that she was impossible to love or understand. It all came rushing to the surface in that moment. Jack didn't interrupt. He just listened. After a long pause, he spoke, his words measured but full of sincerity. Aiyana, you don't have to be too much for anyone. You're not a burden. You're not something to be conquered. You're a person, like anyone else. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are, not for what they want you to be. Her chest tightened at his words, an unexpected lump forming in her throat. It was a rare thing for someone to see her. Not the legend. Not the warrior. Not the towering figure. But the woman she was beneath all the armor. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she had never allowed herself to be. You see me? She asked, her voice low. Jack nodded slowly, his gaze steady. I do. The warmth between them grew, though neither spoke. Aiyana sat in silence, processing the depth of the moment. Her mind raced, wrestling with her own fears and uncertainties. She had lived her life with walls built high around her heart, but now, she wondered if maybe it was time to let them come down. That night, Aiyana lay awake under the stars, her thoughts swirling. Jack had shown her something she had long denied, the possibility of connection, of trust, of understanding. But there was still a part of her, still a fear, that kept her guarded. Could she truly allow herself to open up? Could she let someone in, after all these years of solitude? The next day, their journey took them deeper into the mountains, the terrain more rugged, the air thinner. It was the kind of landscape that tested every part of a person's strength. Aiyana and Jack worked together in silence, preparing camp, hunting, gathering firewood. There was no need for words between them. The connection they had formed in the past few days had grown stronger, deeper, without either of them saying much at all. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert floor, the calm was suddenly shattered. A group of riders appeared over the ridge, rough-looking men on horseback, their faces hidden behind bandanas. They rode with purpose, and Aiyana immediately sensed trouble. She stood up from the fire, her hand resting on the handle of the knife she carried at her side. Jack rose slowly too, his expression unreadable. He said nothing, but Aiyana could feel the quiet strength in him. The leader of the group, a tall, burly man with a scar running across his face, approached them. He sneered at Aiyana, his gaze lingering on her figure, clearly sizing her up. "Well, well," he grunted. "The infamous Apache woman. Thought you could run away from your people, huh? You don't belong out here alone. You and your little cowboy friend better turn around before we decide to help you. Find your way back home." Aiyana's heart pounded, her fingers tightening around the knife. These men had no idea who they were dealing with. Jack stepped forward, his calm demeanor still intact. "We don't want any trouble. We're just passing through," he said, his voice even but firm. The leader laughed, a low, mocking sound. "You think she's going to protect you, cowboy? You can't handle this." But Aiyana wasn't listening to the man. She was already moving, her legs strong and fast as she advanced toward the group. The men drew their guns, but Aiyana was faster. In a blur of motion, she disarmed the closest one, sending his pistol skittering across the dirt. The others hesitated, shocked by her speed and power. Jack stood back, watching in awe. He had seen her strength before, but this was something else entirely. Aiyana was a force of nature, unstoppable when she chose to be. She turned to him, her gaze softening for just a moment, and for the first time, Jack saw the real Aiyana, the woman beneath the legend. "I don't need to be too much for you, Jack," she said quietly, her voice full of raw emotion, "but I'll always be enough." The leader's face twisted in rage, but he knew better than to challenge her. With one last glance, he called off his men, and they retreated into the distance. Aiyana stood tall, breathing heavily, but her heart was lighter than it had ever been. Jack was beside her now, offering a steady hand, and for the first time in her life, Aiyana took it. "I guess you did handle me after all," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Jack simply smiled, his eyes filled with a quiet warmth. "You're not impossible to handle, Aiyana. You just needed someone who could see you for who you are." As the sun set behind the mountains, they walked together side by side, into the future, stronger, not because of what they had fought, but because of what they had finally allowed themselves to share.